founders were very clear about the position of foreign intervention. They said, mind our own business, stay out of entangling alliance, don't get involved in the internal affairs of other nations, but trade with them and talk to them and be friends. Even those people who are imperfect. You know, maybe there's some imperfections in this country that we ought to deal with, and at least we should be talking to other people. You know, there's nothing wrong with spreading the goodness of America and the good principles and the ideas of freedom and liberty and sound money, but it has to be done by setting a good example where they would want to emulate us. The last thing they want to do is to emulate us when we come with bombs and missiles and all the threats and intimidations. We accomplish exactly the opposite. We weaken our national defense, and at the same time, in the various governments that we try to overthrow and undermine, what do? We unify everybody behind their bad dictators. That's exactly what we're doing with the Iranians right now. We are paying our CIA to go over there to try to overthrow their government, and those people who, like Americans, who are the dissidents who would like to overthrow their governments for their patriotic reasons, have to get together and do exactly the opposite. This whole idea of us being in the Middle East, and they say, well, we got to fight them over there, we don't have to fight them here. But the truth is, the longer we're over there, the longer we're occupying their territories, the greater the threat will be that they'll want to come here and do us harm, so that policy should change. You know, and if we have a change in policy, which is necessary, I talk more about the change in foreign policy in the Constitution than I talk about shifting troops here and there, because that is not the answer. If you just move them about, that doesn't change the nature of things. But if we change our policy and design it where we have a strong national defense instead of undermining our national defense, we of course would be very much more involved in protecting our own borders. That's what we would be doing. But since we're facing a bankruptcy, the one thing that we should be doing rather quickly is saving a lot of money. Now, politically, it's a lot easier getting a consensus in this country to save money on all this overseas expenditures rather than domestic programs. So we're now up to close to $1 trillion a year trying to maintain our empire around the world. And we're in a hot war in Afghanistan, one in Iraq, getting ready to hit Iran, and that whole policy has to change. But in the meantime, we need to bring these troops home from Korea and bring them home from Europe and bring them all home. We as taxpayers have to pay more for our non-national defense, for this militarism than all the other countries put together. There's not a single country in the world militarily that can attack us. And we shouldn't be so frightened and intimidated that we have to go after third world nations that don't have weapons and try to provoke them into some type of war. It makes no sense. When we are sworn into the military or into Congress or as a president, we swear to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic as well. The foreign military threat essentially does not exist. That is a concoction. The fact that some people can get in here and do us harm because it's a reflecting of bad foreign policy, that's completely different than what happened during the 60s when I was drafted into the military, when the Soviets had 40,000 nuclear warheads and they were 90 miles off shore. It's completely different. Today, I am convinced that the greatest threat to our liberties today and to our Constitution is right here at home with acts like the Patriot Act. So I get asked at times by those in the media that, we know what you're against. You're against the war. You're against this and that. Well, what are you for? Well, you want the government to do something? Yes, we do. We want our government to do the proper things that are authorized in the Constitution. The most important thing about the Constitution, the purpose of the Constitution, was to restrict the government, not the people. It's supposed to provide a strong national defense. Our national defense actually is weakened because of the way we run our foreign policy. It's supposed to protect the borders. No, the borders are unprotected and totally ignored. The government is supposed to give us sound money. Gold and silver is legal tender. No, they give us paper money, which is counterfeit. They're supposed to protect property rights. No, they tear up property rights with eminent domain. They don't even let us use our property. We're not even allowed to use our property without about 25 permits, so who owns the property? We should own it, not the government. How are we supposed to sort out our problems? Social, and also in the economic sphere. It's supposed to be solved with private personal contracts, voluntary agreements. The government has a responsibility to enforce those contracts. But today, the contracts are dictated to us by the government, whether who you hire and who you fire and how much you pay and who can come into your buildings. And now we have so many. Can you imagine what the founders would think about how many people we have today harassing us? We have over 100,000 federal agents now who carry guns to harass the people. It should be the other way around. They advised against a standing army, but it looks like today we have a standing army of bureaucrats. This is the only place where I think we should have gun control. Take the guns away from the bureaucrats. So we understand, I think, the problems that we face. I think we all understand really how we got here by ignoring the Constitution, and that means that there's not a difficult problem in figuring out what we ought to do. Let's just restore the rule of law and believe in the Constitution and follow it. Now, the one thing that the campaign so far has convinced me of is I've never been hesitant to say that I was very reluctant. I had to be talked into thinking there would be enough of you that would be interested, that I was convinced there were still too few of us and we still needed another generation for education. But the educational process, which is always necessary for a significant change in attitude for a country, has occurred. It has occurred.